everybody, and welcome to another one of our design boardrooms. If this is your first time being here, this is all about our conversation and sharing tips on design, staging, marketing, color. Heck, you name it. We love to talk about it in the design boardroom. We have topics every month. And you help decide those topics. So we'd love to hear from you what you would love to see us talk about, you would love to see us bring to the boardroom. So today we're going to talk about the design principles that work for every room. And that's so important because we have different styles. We could be talking about the teens room. In fact, JoAnne's going to share a few little things with us about something she's working on. But this is for every room. And knowing these design principles and knowing how to implement them is so important to getting that cohesive space. And we want to give you some tips. So, with me, as we have been together the last couple boardrooms, is my good friend JoAnne Lenart-Weary. Hi, JoAnne.
Hello there. The last couple boardrooms in what, 20 years now?
No, it's
So it's been a while. We've been hanging in the same places.
no, it's like we do have stories. We have to stay friends because we know too much, don't we? Oh God. So JoAnne, tell everybody a little bit about you if they don't know, which is probably not even possible, but go ahead.
Well, I've been in the industry for over 40 years, and I've been saying over 40 years for a while because I'm afraid to say 50 years. Um, it started as many of you just simply, loved design from the time I was little. I can remember rearranging my room 100 different ways, painting colors. I remember getting um, a spanking one time because I mixed all this paint together, and we're talking many years ago, and our family was building a home, so we had an outhouse, and the paint color that I ended up with was Easter egg purple, and I painted the outhouse. Um, so I was probably about 6 years old at that time, and still remember my mom giving me a spanking for it, but I still thought the outhouse looked a whole lot better. Um, so here I still am, at 72, still loving to make things look beautiful, and most of all, loving to teach others how to do the same. From teenagers to, as we talked this morning, from Zoomers to Boomers, I love to help.
Oh, I love it. Well, you just made me think. I shared this not too long ago that my mother was having a little dinner party. And my mother didn't do anything little, everything was thought out and you had the best that you had on the table. And as she looked over during the dinner, that I had taken all of the outlets around the room and made them houses. I drew roofs, little sidewalks, and the sidewalks coming out of the plugs themselves were windows apparently in my mind. So I had created houses all around her living and dining room. So she did give me credit for being creative, but she was not happy. Uh, so I've been in the business about 20 years, and just JoAnne and me being able to say 20 and 40 years, it really should encourage you of, we still love what we're doing. We still are considered trends experts, and we try and really keep up with everything that's happening. We put ourselves out there. And we love helping you learn and bringing this right to your computer. So you don't have to go to market. We are going to market and we're keeping up with the trends for you. So, that being said, let's get started on our design principles. I have to say that I love talking about principles because I am if we can say, here's 10 steps or here's 5 things you need to know or how to, that really makes it, doable, bite-sized pieces, so to speak, for how to address things. So that's what we want to do now in talking about design principles. These elements and principles that we're about to talk about will transform your space. We want them to be functional. We want you to kind of feel at home and it be your retreat. But, why can't it be incredibly stylish while we do it?
And Sandra, I think that is the main difference between a professional decorator, designer, stager, and a DIY person. I think that many people think a beautiful house begins at Home Goods or wherever they like to shop. And the reality is, it is the way that you combine all of those elements and understanding the way each thing impacts a room is going to change the overall design, the mood in the room. So these are the building blocks that you need to understand and that you can also use to test your room. Stand back and say, what's wrong here or what's right? Constantly challenge yourself to keep learning and create beautiful rooms consistently.
I agree. There's nothing sadder than walking into a room and you feel like they just went to, I don't know, Ethan Allen and just bought that little block right there, everything that should go in the bedroom.
Right,
Oh,
right.
okay, so let's kick it off with balance. You walk into a space and you almost will lean one way or the other if the room is so off balance. So your goal in any of your spaces is to have that visual balance and harmony in it. If you even just narrow down to the questions of, is this a symmetrical room or an asymmetrical? So symmetrical is, just to refresh your memory, is if we cut the room in half or what your view is, it's a mirror image. You could almost mimic both sides. Um, Asymmetrical is, this is a good example. This is not a symmetrical. You couldn't cut it down the room, but it could have some balance to it. Even every aspect of the space, from the ceiling to the floor. Now, listen, some of these photos, like we just said, these are some of them are out of magazines, some of them are for teaching purposes. Could do a lot better over that mantle and a few little tchotchke things that are doing nothing to enhance the space. But we wanted you to see that there is a balance in the existing elements in this space. You come in and by understanding how you can create a better flow and a better harmony is in this room is the accessories.
Right. And Sandra, I think this is such a good point. All these years of teaching, and Sandra and I teach classes that are hands-on, where we take our students into a room and say we're going to transform it. And how many times I've walked into a room with my students and they'll say, well, this room is already pretty. What are we going to do? Well, many times a room will have pretty stuff, but they haven't used it effectively. And just looking at the mantle in this particular room, what a loss. There's some pretty elements there, but the wreath is too small. The other pieces just blend in. So it's paying attention to those details that we hope you'll learn today. The other thing that I think is important is understand when you're creating balance, you're also creating a certain vibe in the room. And in a room that is very symmetrical, people tend to mimic that with their body language. They tend to sit a little stiffer, more upright, feet on the floor, where asymmetry adds that layer of casualness to a room. So you feel a little more comfortable in that space. So, what is the feeling or the vibe that you want to create in that room? And all of these principles are going to impact that.
Great point. So here's just a good example of a symmetrical space. You could cut it down the middle, right in that fireplace and that piece of art, and it's very balanced. And it is very formal. Like JoAnne said, we would be sitting upright. We might venture out in a minute and cross a leg. I mean, it's like, but a beautiful room. You can always stand back and say, gosh, what would I do different if your client feels like it's a little cold? Well, the layout and the furniture placement has lend itself to being a little bit more formal, but you could always bring in some drapery panels, and bring this nice pop of color into the pillow here and there. And now you have also given that vertical balance as well as with the furniture placement.
And the other thing to do is now picture this room with 4 or 5 people sitting in it. So think again about your clients. How do they use the space? Are they empty nesters that rarely entertain? This arrangement could work beautifully for them. But if they're people that frequently love to have gatherings or cocktail parties, how does this feel with 5 people in and one needs to get up and go to the restroom? And so you're all kind of scrunching back so they can get. So think of the functionality, which we'll talk about more, but think of the room in every possible rendition of that space and how does it impact. That's the kind of information your client pays you for.
JoAnne, that is such a good point. I'm glad you said that because you see this a lot in staging. Because remember, in staging, we are selling, a view which we can see in this one, this window, not necessarily in this one, but that architectural detail and square footage. So you see this flanking a lot. But JoAnne, I love that point about having to get up because it is the least conversational grouping
Mhm.
because you're always bobbing to look at the person, in position 1 to 3. The second person has to keep moving.
Right. So let's talk about focal point. Every room needs something for it to be built around, and understand that each room is going to have multiple areas of living in it. What is the focal point for that? So it may be the fireplace, it could be the artwork, it could be that how do we live without them televisions. So take that focal point and arrange the room around it. I remember years ago doing a model home, and someone lived in the house, but it was on a house tour. And when I went into the room, I said to them, is this the room that you primarily live in? And they said, yes. I said, do you have a television in here? And they said, yes, it's in that cabinet right there. And they pointed, and the cabinet was actually behind the sofa. I said, how do you watch the TV? They said, we turn around and sit on our knees. So it's like, okay, well, they said we want the TV or the fireplace to be the focal point and not the television. Excuse me. So keep in mind that many rooms will have competing focal points in them, but you have to decide which one is more important. And also, does that focal point change with the season? So when we look at this room, we're seeing that cool looking contemporary fireplace on that wall. In the summer, the view may be the focal point, and how do you arrange accordingly? So find that starting point to arrange your furniture.
Oh, goodness. I mean, okay, as I said before, just so you don't panic thinking JoAnne and I don't know what we're talking about. We want you to see some great examples, and in this case, scale and proportion, and then what could feel off. So when you look at this photo, we're talking about scale and proportion, about how elements relate to each other and how they feel in that space. Is it overpowering furniture in a really tight space or inconsistent sizes? So with this small arrangement, these shelves, it does not feel proportionate to what it is over. Not to mention, well, we're going to talk about having things like that over your head. It's that we're no feng shui experts, but we know when something feels like, okay, could that fall on us? So we want you to see some really good examples of what works and what doesn't. So I love this photo in contrast, this space to what you just saw. So furniture is very proportionate to each other. They are relating in size. I love this vertical art. It makes my eye go up. We're tracking around the space. But then we get to this teeny tiny, tiny little centerpiece. And do you see how that feels off? I mean, even if you don't walk in and go, the word scale and proportion pop in your mind, you know that, gosh, I love everything, but I could have something could have happened a little bit different on the coffee table, on the dining table, excuse me. But I
And
do,
see,
go
oh,
ahead.
I'm sorry, Sandra.
No, go ahead.
Um, and the other thing we want you to notice in this room, like Sandra says, the scale and proportion, but let's look at line, shape, and form, which we'll talk about again. But this room is such a great example of the fact that notice how many rectangles there are in this room. We have rectangles in the drawers, we have rectangle table, we have a rectangular light, we have rectangle panes in the windows. So when you look at the room, also look at line, shape, and form. Thank goodness the piece of art has a little more organic feel to it, so it softens that. Because in essence, even the lamps are a rectangle. If you were to draw a line around them, the plant is a rectangle. So watch that your line, shape, and form are accomplishing again that vibe or feeling you want in that room.
You're going to see it a minute when we talk about contrast because your eye will go to these contrasts. But like JoAnne just said, your eye wants to also follow lines or shapes. And so right now, and again, it may take you a second to realize it, but my eye's now going down every chair leg, so that's what will happen when you enter those spaces. And we got
Yeah,
a lot to track here too.
we do have a lot to track here. And this goes back again, for any of you that have been around for a while, our theory of DNA, you're darn near always your design DNA. So you can see this is a person that is drawn to curves and rounds. And again, it's a lovely feel. It can make the room feel more feminine than not, but you got to know, as Kenny Rogers says, know when to hold them and know when to fold them. So a preponderance of any line, shape, form can end up taking the room in a different way. Now, the vertical draper panels that need to be steamed um, add some height to the room and take away that line. But this room is, has some beautiful elements, but it could have been treated a little differently.
And when you look at these spaces and think about the principles, this is a very nicely balanced room. But in a minute, we're going to talk about functionality. And, at the end of the day, you have to have a place to sit your drink. We always say, I can sit here, but where can I place my drink or my cocktail kind of thing? This just drives me crazy. Beautiful room. I feel like we want to reiterate that, but we want to be able to function with I can't get anything over here. I'd have to get up and walk around to these little end tables. So they almost would make more sense if they were probably like they were designed to slide underneath this sofa and be accessible. So think about the functionality of even a well-balanced room.
Color harmony, our favorite thing. As a couple of color experts here, we have seen color again and again make or break a room. And it really is so much easier than one would think. First of all, you could take our color class, that'll really help you. But select a color palette that is going to give you the feeling that you want in the room. Again, go back to what is the vibe or the feeling I'm trying to create. Many of you have our power words form. I want a room that is calm, cool, and sophisticated. I want a room that is warm, cozy, and inviting. You're going to use color to help create that mood. And as you're combining colors, a good rule of thumb is to use a 60-30-10 rule. So 60% will be dominant, secondary color at 30%, and then your accent color. So this picture is a great example of that. You can see the dominant color on the wall and the upholstery are in that green. We have 30% of the rose in the drapery panels and the area rug and pulled through in the accessories. And then we have that gold, which gives a nice contrast to what we are doing in the rest of the room. Now, obviously, this was staged for a photo. I mean, you can tell just by the way the accessories are used. But 60-30-10, if you are terrified of color, is always going to be a good rule to follow.
JoAnne, and now's a good time. JoAnne and I just had a conversation before we started, before we entered the design boardroom. Um, Interestingly, how teens are drawn to different colors, but even with picking a different color palette for them, having the 60-30-10 ensures that balanced color balance room every time. Tell them a little bit about that, JoAnne.
Well, for one thing, our age of our eyes is going to play havoc sometimes with the color as seniors or boomers, as um, I am. Our eyes start to get a yellow film on them, so colors become less vibrant to us. However, we still like the softness of that. It's pleasing to our eye. But when we do teens, I'm doing a teen decorating class right now, and many of them are drawn to the more vibrant version of a color that if I were to bring those colors into this space that has more muted colors in it, you would see that it would age these colors. It would make them look dirty. It would be a case of colors competing instead of completing one another.
Oh, the good old contrasting variety. So this is where we get to add that depth, and by having a variety of textures and patterns and colors, and again, that right ratio when we're talking about colors, that's where we make a room more interesting. Love how they have a texture, a different type of material on the back behind the bed in this photo. Again, we're missing a few pieces of art or whatever it might be. But by having that variety of smooth and rough and textures, you make that space more interesting. So
Here's
yeah, talk
oh,
about this one.
here's a great example of contrast. One of the things that you want to keep in mind, I love this color green. It's very similar to my kitchen cabinet colors. Um, and having that light sofa and that contrast is beautiful. But notice that when you look at all of the plants on the left-hand side, and the light fixture being light, that pulls the eye up. So you get to appreciate the whole room floor to ceiling. Now imagine if those light elements were not there. What's going to happen is your eye will stop at the transition point where the light and the dark come together. Now, if you are staging a house, you just made the room look at least 50% smaller because you stop the eye path halfway in the room. And that's a very common thing that stagers do. They do a room all in neutrals and then they throw some brightly colored pillows on the sofa to create some contrast and interest. But what it does is it stops the eye at that level. So when you're creating contrast, keep in mind if I have light towards the floor, I need to pull some of that light color up towards the ceiling. If I've dark towards the floor, i.e. in the area rug, the upholstery, the pillows, make sure you bring some of that dark color up. So you're bringing the eye up and out. And use contrast wisely. So this room, this focal wall, which many people love to create that focal wall, if you could see the room in its entirety, that is a short little jut out in this room. So what it does is it actually makes the room feel smaller and choppy. in there. So make sure if you're doing an accent wall to create some contrast that you've used it effectively. Ideally, it should be on the wall that you see when you walk into the space. Again, if you use an accent wall, make sure you create balance by bringing that color across the room, like they've done here with the sofa. Excuse me. However, in this particular case, let's go back to line, shape, and form again. Look at all of those horizontal rectangular lines. We have it in the wall shelf. We have it in the console table below the TV. We have it even in the TV. We have it in the sofa shape. We have it in the coffee table. So now we start to look more like a bowling alley as opposed to a room that feels friendly, warm, inviting, and enlarges the space. If we look at the room on the right, same thing again. Notice that most of the contrast sits low in the room, and then you go into that white wall. There again is an example of the eye will stop where the contrast happens. And so you need to guide it by bringing that change in value up in space. And value, just if you look at your paint deck, value is going to be, in most cases, up and down your paint strip. There's usually going to be 7 versions of a color, 7 different values.
I'm going to throw this out too because it's what I am deciding today. Even the direction of your tile. JoAnne, when you were talking about this room, it's like even the
Yeah,
grid lines, where you're going to put the grout in which direction. I just made our laundry room look double the size because they had the tile going. It was like a airplane strip, going, right down when you walked in. And by changing the direction, it's still, a rectangle. But even by changing that direction, I changed the size of the space. So keep that in mind. And then also, I just pointing out little things like this. I feel like this is just going to fall over any minute. You know,
right,
so
right.
it's just those little things. I mean, if you want to just sit that in something larger or something that has, where just psychologically, that that is going to support it. Those are just those little things. Okay, let's talk rhythm and repetition. We don't always think about this as much as we do balance and scale and some of these other principles that we're talking about. But if that room can have a rhythm to it and have that flow of the repeat of the colors in the right place in that space, have a kind of repetition of different textures, that's where, your eye will go. You will have that feeling of contentment. But thinking about that line, shape, and form again, that's going to help by having this different. I'm not sure if you can see my cursors when I do this.
Yes, you can.
Okay, good. Just having the circular feel of that chandelier, that pendant, going with every other hard line, even having a different movement with the plant helps a lot in this space. So now that, if you just get that checkpoint, you're going to have your checklist, I guess, in your mind, you'll start to see little things that you can do in each of these spaces to shake it up. Now they did shake up this room. I mean,
They did.
I love it, but it has a rhythm. It has a style. They've been consistent with it. And it's just, it's not in my house anywhere, but I love the way this feels and just that repetitive motion. I love the way my eye just is now tracking to the right. We've anchored all, if this had been some like just simple gray sofa, it wouldn't be as impactful as having this punch of color, which is, see the rhythm, how it's being repeated, is moved up and down. We even have this repeat of this gold color. Again, the value changed somewhat, but it is a great example of being able to move throughout the space. Okay. Love this room. Total opposite. We went from the super artistic to the very calm, monochromatic space. But notice even the artwork is creating a movement. The lines in this and the curves, we have some interest and variety in that versus the very harsh square table. Um, I love this space. Texture of the drapery panels, movement of the accessories. Very good example of having that repetition and that's creating a rhythm.
And
And
Sandra,
go
let
ahead.
me make one other little comment again. One of the things that Sandra and I always try to encourage our students and our listeners to do is, really paying attention to those details. So notice how not putting the second pillow in the left corner of that sofa made that actually feel more people friendly, because if we had the pillow in the left corner, now the sofa kind of becomes an island. It's like the pillows become the exclamation mark at the end of the sentence, which is this grouping. So subtle little things when you're doing your room. Try moving your pillows around. Angle a chair slightly or make it straight. Try those little nuances, because those are the things that really can add such a level of polish to a space.
In fact, JoAnne and I have taught many, many classes together, and the students will play with the pillows, try them in different places, but by standing back, it's almost like, do I want an exclamation point or I'm doing a parentheses kind of thing. But we love having that opportunity when you can see your accessories in motion. Well,
So
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Sandra. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's got to function. At the end of the day, unless you're just doing a staging, or you're doing a photo shoot. I mean, how many times have we seen something in a magazine and we're thinking, okay, the sofa's in front of the fireplace. I mean, we have several examples of that in some of our classes. But this is here we have the bedroom and we have a nice glass wall into the living room or family room, whatever you referring to it. So it's got a function at the end of the day. And here's one of JoAnne's favorite, the little ledge over the bed. So keep in mind, it can be a great individual item, but if it is placed in a position to not be functional, or
Right.
again, cohesive to what you're trying to accomplish in that room, you've just kind of, I don't know, brought all your great skills down or the overall feel of the space.
So unity and cohesion are going to be the principles that help make a room all work together. One of, again, common mistake that both professionals and DIYers make is they tend to decorate in um, zones in the room. And I don't mean our zones, the deck or, our decorating zones, but they go to the store, they buy some things, they come home and they create a pretty little table. Like I call them pretty pockets in the room. But you have to think of how those pretty pockets connect with one another, and how the room will feel pulled together. So if I walk in and look like I'm looking at a store display, oh, the left corner is pretty, but now the middle of that wall has something completely different on it that doesn't make sense with the left. And then on the right, we've created another display. So you want to be sure not to merchandise your rooms. You want to create cohesion.
So love the concept of negative space. You guys may know I started out work. My very first job was in advertising, and I understood that greatly when I was putting together ads because if you filled up every piece of square footage on that full page ad, your reader would flip the page and not know what you were selling. So by having this negative space, it gives you that breathing room or that pause to be able to focus on the elements in the room that you want to enjoy or you want to highlight. Um, The other thing I want to point out right now, because it really is one of our pet peeves, is the use of mirrors. As much as you may think a mirror would create a little bit of a pause because it's not a piece of art, this is a great example how that mirror is really reflecting, and it's not negative anymore because it's highlighting and reflecting what it's seeing, what it is picking up. So we want you to not feel like you have to fill every square inch. Love, love, love this room. This is beautiful. You have that big contrast in the black and the white in this space. However, because of the negative of the white and the bare elements in here, you get to really appreciate what they want you to focus on. So don't be afraid to have negative space. Look, this is where typically people are placing something. This is a gorgeous material, but the room has a lot going on. So embrace the negative space.
And Sandra, if we can say there too, like on that fireplace, let's go back to that principle of contrast. There's that contrast of that dark hole of the fireplace against that beautiful marble on the walls. So you might want to think about, do I need something to bring the eye up over that? Because my eye's going to stop at that fireplace. But as you say, sometimes the negative space is the best way to go. And also the way that the grouping overhangs that chair and table, but using the horizontal lines on the chair gives that grouping a feeling of more width. I mean, the furniture grouping, not the art grouping. So again, see how the line, shape, forms, all of those elements gel together.
And we are not talking about this, but I do want to point out I love having these dimensional items in this
Yes,
grouping. In fact, I have a silver wishbone right now. And I got inspiration from looking this because I always am trying to lean it on some books, or right now it's in with some antlers that I had that were painted. I'm now going to go put my wishbone on the wall. So,
absolutely.
oh gosh.
Texture and layers. This is the key to making a room feel comfortable. Um, I live in Northwest Pennsylvania. Sandra has a home in Colorado. So it gets cold in both of our areas. And uh, every seating area in my room has a pretty throw on it, because I often find when company comes to visit, it's just kind of a comfort thing that they'll automatically take that throw and drape it over their legs. So make it easy for people to feel comfortable. And then just creating that contrast and interest of changing out your fabrics, changing sheens of paint colors, which is a texture illusion. Adding those layers is always going to make a room feel more interesting. And
Love
here's a
this
great
one.
example. Yes, I mean, we have these primitive textures that at one time, many people didn't want to use. No, no, no. When I think of when I first started teaching, um, back in the 70s and 80s, I was teaching a decorating class, and I can remember back then there were very clear rules. The 10 rules of decorating. All your furniture has to match. You don't put textures, primitive things with silk fabrics. Thank God we've gotten so much more relaxed, and it's so much more enjoyable. This room is a treat for my eyes. And I'm going to enjoy looking at it every time I turn around. I'm going to see it in a new way. You may not be in love with the primitive styling, but what we want you to notice is how expertly this particular designer combined these textures.
I totally agree. And also, if you are taking some of your own photographs, you're doing your own portfolio, and I snap mine even when I bring in the professional. I've taken some beforehand because let's face it, sometimes it it looks the best right that moment. But notice at the different angle that this was shot. It's just kind of, it's not that stand up, it's just different, and we get to appreciate this what the way that Simple Home, Simple Life styled this and photographed it.
Hmm.
So JoAnne and I have put together a handout for you. It's a two-page handout. It's the principles of every room. So on your first column, it's everything that we have talked about, the balance, focal points, scale, proportion. And then we've given you a description. We won't read every one of these for you, but for instance, in the balance category, we've described what that is and how you can just, in a quick bullet form, refresh your memory. And just even answering some of these questions. Is this going to be a symmetrical room or an asymmetrical balance? And then some of the solutions in this column, for instance, balance a large sofa with, and you fill in the blank on the opposite wall. It might be that focal wall where you have your television or some architectural detail. So here we've covered all this, even our color harmony. Let's look at that one. The description of using your 60-30-10, where you can identify what they're going to be in that space, which will help you maybe emphasize if you only have one little impact of the accent color and you stand back and look, okay, I don't have 10%, I only have like 2. So then you just bring in a few more of that accent color. And then the next page of this will also be the other ones that we've talked about, some of the textures and layers. Let's just look at that one. What are they going to be? And like what your favorite one will be. Just like JoAnne was saying, the favorite throw that somebody might pick every time. So hope you've enjoyed this. We want to offer you this deal because we love the fact that you come and hang out with us in the boardroom. Um, we have a design principles for stagers. Now it says for stagers because we originally it was marketed to stagers, but it really is for designers, decorators, DIY. Just it's more in depth of what we have covered today. This is just a short version of that. So, and don't panic when it says 30 lessons. That includes your handouts and all the stuff that goes with it, as well as the recording. So if you would like to enjoy that, you can have that for half off. You just use the code Design Power. You access that through the DSA website, and you'll see it on the DSA website under Learn. So here's some contact information. JoAnne and I would love for you to reach out on. And again, if you have any topics you want us to cover, please let us know.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, guys.